What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I'm feeling ready to pump you up.
I brought the muscle shirt, baby. We're both feeling it. Chris, are you starting a path down powerlifting, or does this have something to do with how you're keeping your heavy metal street cred?
It has nothing to do with powerlifting. It has everything to do with me watching Conan O'Brien and Kevin Nealon and Dana Carvey recreate their apparently Hans and Franz musical they wrote in the early 90s based on the Saturday Night Live sketch. And they had Robert Smigel doing his phenomenal Arnold Schwarzenegger impression. And that's it.
I love that we're getting stuff like that now, because why was I, as like a 6-year-old, running around quoting that? Why did I know that? Why was that a tidbit of pop culture that I was aware of at that age? I don't understand. But speaking of pumping you up, we've got a real special guest for today's episode. Our guest today has a background in dance and loves the connection between music and human movement. As a fan of heavy music, she can be found listening to Breakin' Benjamin and AFI, and as a trainer, she's known for her dedication to her clients and has appeared in the book Strong and Sculpted by Brad Schoenfeld. Please welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, my friend, personal trainer Stephanie Kotsokous. Steph, I gotta ask you, how you feeling?
Now I'm feeling good.
See, I usually try to pump everyone up with their introductions.
I feel good after that. Thank you. That was nice.
Absolutely. It is awesome having you on the show. Steph, tell us a little bit about your background as a dancer and then how you kind of morphed from a dancer into a personal trainer.
Yeah, I danced since I was a child, which kind of moved into doing professional work. And as I got older, you have to be an athlete to be a dancer. So
right.
I started teaching, and then I realized that I didn't want to be in the corporate world ever.
Right.
And I wanted to work with people, and I wanted to teach. Can't imagine why. And I went to school to get my personal training certification back in 2008. And Brad Schoenfeld was my teacher. I was lucky enough to catch Brad as he was doing a little stint teaching in New York City, this personal training school, and which most personal trainers don't go to school.
Right.
For this.
Right.
And after that, got a job right out of there. Took my tests, got an NSCA certification, and the rest is kind of history. That's where we met. That is awesome. Yes. Yeah. Steph was assigned as my personal trainer when I first started my fitness journey, in probably what was the most corporate of corporate style gyms, right? Usually you think of a gym as like a big meathead kind of place, and the type of place that makes Planet Fitness really, really angry. And instead this was more of like the retirees and like the rich moms in town would go to this gym. And that's just how we met. Obviously we looked at each other and went, they definitely listen to metal. Steph was like, I'm going to train that guy. And I was like, I want her to be my trainer. Yeah, totally.
And the reason that we're talking about personal training and movement and all this kind of physical stuff is because Chris and we have done an episode on scream therapy and the positive effects of heavy music on mental health. And so I started thinking, there has to be some sort of correlation between heavy music and how much you can fucking lift, right? How if you want to squat 600, you can't be listening to Kenny G and the Carpenters. You've got to put on some really heavy music. So that's what we're talking about today. Songs to lift to. The songs that get you hyped up for a workout, and if those heavy breakdowns actually translate into being able to help you to eke out that last rep. Chris, as someone who admittedly is maybe not, a fan of working out or someone that doesn't really work out, how do you feel about doing this episode?
I was going to say the only lifting I do is lifting slices of pizza to my face. So that's my experience. But the way I kind of looked at it, there's plenty of music that, even though I don't work out, that elicits a physical response from me. And there's music that will absolutely, get, the blood pumping and the adrenaline pumping. And I may not be using that to lift heavy things over my head, but it's still a physical response that I'm having. And so I'm excited to just talk about more music that I love and talk about music that just gets me excited and makes me want to move if I wanted to do that. But yeah, it's like you're saying, clearly of the three of us, I'm the one who lives a, what's the word? Sedentary lifestyle. Yeah, that's me.
Sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah, that's me. So, but yeah, I'm still very excited to jump in and, like I'm saying, just talk about the music that I love.
You know what? I love that you bring up that you, like, even though you may not be lifting heavy weights over your head, you still have like this really just this built-in reaction to music, right? Like at a live concert, I've literally been to concerts where people look like they just ran a marathon, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where you're just like drenched in sweat, and it's just this adrenaline that pumps up, and it's just this physical reaction that you have to music. It's sort of like, you hear a song that you like, or you just hear some sort of music going on in the background and you start to tap your foot. I feel like as humans, we're built in with this response where music is just going to make us move. So like, what are your thoughts on that, Steph, coming from a dance background where it's like, to me, the connection between music and the human body is like so obvious. What's your take on that?
Yeah. I mean, from a dance perspective, I mean, I used to say everyone can dance, right? It's kind of like, Ratatouille. Sure. Everyone can cook. Yeah.
Tell that to me after 4 whiskeys at a wedding.
I've heard stories. But they took place in Epcot, in Disney World.
Oh, God. We're not bringing up the Epcot story on this podcast.
No.
For everyone that's wondering, I have never drank my way all around the world in Epcot. I've only ever made it to Mexico. That's the 3 times I've been there. And then I yelled at the poor woman in the sushi restaurant. When she asked me what I wanted to drink, I just yelled back in her face, "Shrimp tempura!" Yeah, that's why John doesn't drink as much anymore.
Oh, boy.
Anyway.
No tempura. No tempura. No. And dancing as a profession or even teaching, I think you look at it a couple different ways, especially like I taught children and adults when I was a dance teacher.
Right.
And one of the things I would do, for example, I was a tap teacher at one point, was one of the things I hated. I hated teaching, best at it. But I hated teaching it because it was a rhythm thing where you realize like some people just cannot like clap to the beat. They just can't. You ever see somebody like that? Like you're like, okay, no. And I would make the kids get down on the floor with their hands and do the foot rhythms on the floor before we even did the feet.
Right.
I would make them do it with, for some reason, the correlation hands, feet, people just can't coordinate it. So I was like, get down, let's do it with our hands.
Right.
And I would try my hardest. And I was actually pretty good at teaching tap. So by the end, everybody was on the beat. Right. But you realize how hard it is to teach rhythm to other people. And some of that's organic, right? Like, why can't you clap to this beat? But listening to music, like what is the brain not getting there?
Right.
But I think physically, that's what dance is. It's music, it's the things we hear for the most part, like, brought out through the body. It's emotion brought out through the body.
Right.
And I saw recently this dance company that, they try to be so different, but there was no music. It was like, like when everybody's doing those like silent discos and all you hear is like slap. Shuffling.
The videos of like James Brown dancing with no music and it's just the shuffling of his feet across. Oh, I love those.
Yeah.
It's like the squeaking of the sneakers on the basketball court.
Yeah. That's what you hear. Except you hear everyone like like fighting for their lives, trying to breathe.
But like,
why is there no music? I don't know.
Yeah. But I feel like
there's still like that natural reaction, right? Like you're at a concert and like even if it's a band that you're not familiar with, you're going to start kind of headbanging. You're going to start kind of just like bobbing to the music. And I just feel like that kind of shows that even though some people can't clap on 2 and 4, yeah, like that's horrifying. But there is still that natural reaction that music is going to elicit. Like I said, Chris, when you go to a concert, like I've been to concerts with you, I don't know that you're a great tap dancer, but I know that you can keep a rhythm with your fists in the air.
Yes.
Or when you're headbanging. And I feel like that's the thing is like as metalheads, yes, we may not be dancing, but we're keeping some sort of rhythm to it. I think we've talked about it before, how there is this perception that metalheads are like cavemen and that we are just like, yeah, guitar go, singer scream, and I like it. But there's more to it. We have that reaction there, and I think there's that groupthink, right? Of like everyone is banging their head in rhythm to this song, and everyone is screaming, "Hey, hey, hey!" and you just get into it. So again, there may not be that maybe natural talent for dance, but there is still a reaction from the body. And we had talked about in our scream therapy episode, that's why I love that we're almost like going back to this topic. We had talked about the effects of heavy music on studying. And like I started thinking of this in terms of my like workout playlist, because I have to have a specific type of music on while I'm working out. I have to have something that's a little bit heavier. I have to have something that's got like more driving drums. And I think that may have to do with like syncing up tempo wise, like syncing reps up to the tempo. Do you feel like there's like some sort of connection there too?
Oh yeah. And that 2021 study, it was published on PubMed. You can find it. I sent it to you earlier. Mm-hmm. It actually talked about that. It went through kind of everything, and it talked about kind of, and a lot of it was centered around personal preference for what type of music people chose. And it was like the I don't know what they offered the people in the study, but I think it was like over 85% of them chose rap music. Okay. I don't know what the offerings were. Yeah. You know, I don't know if like metal was even an option, but most of the people chose the rap music. Right. And I found that interesting because it's that beat. It's just, you know, that whatever it is. And when you're lifting in a certain manner, like I am a lifter through and through. I'm not a cardio bunny. I have to get that out there. I'm not doing like, you know.
Endless amounts of treadmill,
on the elliptical, but there's an element of that when you're doing something like a bench press or a row or a squat. You know, when there's a heavy beat, you know that you got to get out of this deep squat. Right. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're like, this is hard. Yeah. I want to give up. Mm-hmm. The music sometimes is like over 50% going to carry you up out of that squat. Right. I think that in my experience, if it's a driving song, I mean, if you get stuck with like a transition in the bottom of a squat and it's like dead silent, you're in trouble. Yeah.
But Chris, I mean, like the same as with this study from PubMed, Chris, we found the same sort of thing in the way that people were like concentrating while they were studying, right? Where when we did our scream therapy episode, we talked about how like this heavier music that people were familiar with almost just helped them concentrate a little bit more. Do you remember going over that?
Yeah, because I remember in my experience, I was talking about how like in college and high school, my go-tos when I was writing research papers was Gwar and Exodus. You know, I'd be listening to Tempo of the Damned and Beyond Hell. And like and that's what I'm listening to at 3 a.m. the day before a research paper is due, because I'm the eternal procrastinator who writes the entire research paper the night before it's due. And
that's Chris's version of doing a deep squat, is leaving a task until the very last minute.
That just gave me anxiety for you.
But yeah, and I do remember, you know, in the research that we found in that episode is that I think part of it was just kind of like, well, the music you like helps, but at the same time, a style of music that does kind of in the same way you guys are talking about a drum beat or a guitar riff that is constantly driving you forward and pushing you forward, it does in some ways help you concentrate. As like a music nerd, I also kind of want to say that how in some ways people say like classical music helps you concentrate. The classical influence you sometimes see in thrash metal and heavy metal is maybe a part of that. Maybe that's just me trying to sound smarter than I actually am. But I think that's, again, something where it's like the music is getting the blood pumping and getting the blood flowing and helping me concentrate and focus. And for me, it also had to be specific songs, you know, like the reason I went to an album like Beyond Hell versus War Party from Gwar is because on Beyond Hell, I didn't know as many of the lyrics. So I wasn't distracted by singing along to the lyrics instead of typing up a research paper about like ancient Rome or some shit. But I think... Yeah. But I think that was kind of the things that we were talking about back then. And it's interesting. I have no way to cite this, but I seem to remember hearing someone recommending it, or it was based on a study, is that like part of your morning routine having a playlist. And the idea behind having a playlist that matches the length of your morning routine, it, on the one hand, the songs can tell you like, hey, if I'm hearing this song and I'm still buttering my toast instead of getting dressed, that means I need to like get my shit together and start getting ready faster. And at the same time, it was also recommended to have songs with a faster tempo as you get closer to the time that you're supposed to leave your house and go to work or go to school or at the end of your routine. So the idea is that as the songs get faster in tempo, it gives you that feeling of, oh, I need to keep moving. I need to keep moving. So
you know what I'm imagining, right? Is like the old cartoons with like the assembly line. Dun, 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 dun.
I mean, I think like a Looney Tunes episode as my morning routine sounds about right. Like,
either that or like I'm gonna torture Michelle now and just have like on a 15-minute loop the He-Man version of What's Going On by Four Non-Blondes. That's a fast enough, tempo. That'll get me going. Chris, I love that you bring up the connection between like concentrating and how you can kind of get yourself into a rhythm, whether it be your morning routine or a workout, right?
Yep.
Because I feel like a lot of times I can't listen to anything that I'm either too familiar with or something that has really singable lyrics.
Yeah.
It has to be something almost incoherent. So like a lot of times it has to be newer stuff that I've heard from discussing it on the podcast that I add to this metal playlist, like my metal workout playlist, that's what I call it. Or it has to be like the most brutal, disgusting death metal so that I don't know what the words are. Because I find myself getting stuck singing along or like dancing in place between a rest, you know what I mean? And now it's like, oh shit, like I've been sitting here for 4 minutes just like playing air guitar to this one song when I should have been picking the weights back up again and doing fucking curls for the girls. Like, Steph, do you think that there's anything to that where it's like we should have something that isn't too familiar to us or like something that just kind of keeps us driving forward like we've been talking about?
Yeah, I actually did this morning. I got like zoned out. I don't even know what exercise I was supposed to come back to the left leg.
Okay.
I did right leg. It was tough. I'm going to come back to left. And then I got like sidetracked and this happens a lot because what I was listening to was, I don't remember what exactly it was, but it was familiar. And I was writing something down. Right. And I zoned out and I'm like, oh shit, I got to get back. Was I on the left? What the hell am I doing? And then you have like a moment of like getting down on yourself that like the world's going to end because I put too much rest time in between those two exercises.
My gains!
Now I'm like, I got to start from the top. Are these junk sets?
Yeah.
This junk volume.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Yeah.
You go back to the right leg and you're like, why is this so hard? Oh my God. I'm so fatigued.
Yeah. But when I have Apple Music suggest me new things, sometimes then that's like the same thing happens, but in the inverse, I'm like, oh, what's this new song?
Oh, okay.
Now I'm focusing completely on the music and not on what I'm supposed to be there to do. Because remember, there's nobody yelling at me to get back up and do it. I'm a trainer of myself. So, you know, when you're working out alone, it's a little bit more difficult to stay on target if you're somebody that gets carried away by music.
Right. Which is why, like, when I first started this playlist of mine, a lot of it was like old Slipknot, like first album Slipknot, Killswitch Engage, Unearth, like stuff that I was familiar with, Pantera, Metallica, and like now when I have this playlist on, when one of those songs come on, it's just an immediate skip because I need something else. I need something that's like a little bit fresher in my brain, and like now by comparison, having a band like Terminal Sleep on there, and then having like Cemetery Gates come on. Like, why did I put Cemetery Gates on my workout playlist? That's at least like the ending half of the song. Sure, it makes sense, but the beginning part of it, like you need to have something like that that's going to push you, and you need to have something like that that's going to get you out of that sticking point like we were talking about before. If you're stuck at the bottom of a squat, now you need something to kind of push you forward. And Chris, you've brought this up a lot, how music has a tendency to kind of like lift your spirits and sort of like inspire in a way. You brought it up recently when talking about Andrew WK, and I think that that's a really great point, the way that music will help to kind of inspire you to maybe it's either get out of a really tough spot in life or like get out an extra rep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny you bring up Andrew WK again, because we did have that conversation. And a song that I also thought about is, I figured a lot of this would be, hey, we're all into metal. We're all going to be talking about this heavy distortion, awesome breakdowns, fast riffs, whatever it is that's driving you forward. But a song that I did think about just because of like the way that it has such a powerful sound to it is I Get Wet by Andrew WK. It has these horns. It has this very triumphant sound about it. And it's constantly driving you forward, which is most Andrew WK songs. But like it's constantly pushing you forward, and then at the end you've got the chorus keeps repeating, and it's a catchy fucking chorus, and you've got the horns, and you've got backup singers, and you've got Andrew WK like yelling his head off, like it's just all of this stuff that's driving you forward. And for me, some of the songs I was thinking about as we were thinking about having this conversation and recording this episode were not just the songs where it's the fastest riffs or the coolest breakdowns or whatever it is, but also the songs that just sound powerful. And, Andrew WK was something that came up. And I also thought about some of like the power metal that I enjoy, a band like Manowar and how powerful some of their music is. A song
just put a Manowar poster up in your gym and it's like, okay, I'm trying to look like those guys.
I want to look like the ripped dudes in loincloths, all oiled up and everything. Yeah. No, I want to look like that. I want to look good in a loincloth. That's what it is.
Work for your loincloth body.
I want I want the Manowar workout.
Steph, write it up. Write it up. Just the way that we do like playlist suggestions on Spotify, Steph's going to write a workout for everyone that's going to go along with this episode so that you can get a Manowar body and you can walk around in a loincloth. Liver King who?
But I wanted to make sure that I was kind of covering all bases of the things that kind of get me moving and get me excited. And Manowar is definitely one of those bands. It was funny. I hadn't listened to the song in a while, and I forgot some questionable lyrics at the end of the first line of Hail and Kill, where he says, "May your sword stay wet like a young girl in her prime." And I was like, oof. I forgot he said that in this song. And this is like right after their song Pleasure Slave on the same album. So this was like peak 1988 Manowar.
Yeah.
So but it's still a cool fucking song that makes me want to go like slay orcs or something. So
You're just trekking through Middle Earth.
Yes. Chris, why are we not best friends? Sorry, you just made a Lord of the Rings. You just made a Lord of the Rings reference.
It's I'm not going to start talking about Lord of the Rings because then we won't be friends. We won't be friends after that conversation.
Chris is of the opinion of there is only one return of the king.
No,
there's only one return.
And it's of the king, and it's not of the king, it's of the Jedi. But like I've even said on this podcast that the whole like Star Wars fans versus Lord of the Rings fans thing is completely made up by Kevin Smith. Like, it's when I have online discourse with Lord of the Rings fans, there is no animosity there. Like, Star Wars fans and Lord of the Rings fans get along just fine. Star Trek fans, different story. Yeah. But Star Wars fans and Lord of the Rings fans, completely fine. You know, me, I'm just not a fan of fantasy. I much prefer, you know, my Star Wars sci-fi, you know, that's stealing from fantasy and samurai films and westerns and whatever the fuck else. But yeah, it's so when I to be honest, when I think of orcs, obviously there's, you know, the army in Lord of the Rings, but I also tend to think of like Dungeons and Dragons and those orcs and half orcs and what's the ability called? Why am I talking about this?
I was gonna say you guys talking about Lord of the Rings is like, yeah, you better be working for a Man of War body if you're gonna talk about Lord of the Rings.
Cane out. Yeah.
Why am I talking about half orc racial abilities where when they drop to 0 hit points, they immediately come back with 1 hit point? That has nothing to do, although maybe he's listening to a sick like powerlifting playlist.
There you go.
That's like, oh, I died just as the sick riff started and it brought me back. Let's go with that.
It's all relative.
Oh man.
See? It's connected. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I love that you bring up powerlifting because there have been times where you and I have been recording and in between, like within a break or something like that, or we're like thinking of the next topic to jump into, you just hear a keg fall in the background of your recording. Chris's brother has a tendency to lift very heavy things over his head.
Yes.
Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes.
What would your brother have on his powerlifting playlist?
So here's what's fun is that he is someone...
And how did he get into powerlifting too? Because the first time I met him, he was built like a twig.
Oh yeah, I think what happened was he made the decision to join the Navy and he started working out to get in shape for boot camp. He really wanted to be in special forces. He was working with someone to make sure he was in the best shape he could be in boot camp, to make sure that he was going to pass all the physical training, all this and that. So he gets through the boot camp. He's doing all this training. He's going through. And at some point during his time in the Navy, he was working out just to stay in shape. And I think, like I hear about so many other people that get into powerlifting or bodybuilding or whatever it is, he sees the results, is getting complimented on the results, and is like, well, okay, I know I can lift this amount of weight. I can probably lift more. I'm going to push myself to lift more. And it kept going and more and more and more to the point where, yes, he had a makeshift gym on the patio in our backyard where he'd be lifting, I think it was like a log that he would lift and put a shitload of weight on. And like he'd be, yes, we would be recording and you could hear suffocation or skinless as you hear him yelling and keg slamming. It was also a lot of fun when I would hear Real Big Fish and Streetlight Manifesto come on as he was lifting. And I think, you know, some of that is it's got to be like I was talking about before. It's the brutal death metal isn't the only music that gets me and my brother going. Like for a long time, he was in his third wave ska phase, and I was right there with him, and we went to see Real Big Fish and Goldfinger and Streetlight and all these other bands. He just moved down to North Carolina, and on the drive down we're listening to Mad Caddies and like some of these other bands, and while the death metal was certainly the music he usually listened to, it was always funny when all of a sudden I heard "sell out" as he's grunting and lifting a keg over his head. So
I love that though, because Steph, you brought it up before how like in this study by PubMed, they stated that like rap music was the highest chosen music to listen to during these lifts, right? And so yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be heavy music, as long as it's something that's going to get you pumped up. And this is exactly what we talked about during our Scream Therapy episode, Chris, where it's like it matters more so the music that you're connecting with and the music that you're listening to that is going to push you forward. But I think at the same time, in regards to metal and metalheads just have the tendency to want to kind of go for the look. They want to look like the dudes in Man of War. They want to look like they're, power lifters. They want to look like they can lift a log over their head. And so I think the music and the image is what drives so many listeners of heavy music to work out. And not to mention that in most of like what people would consider musclehead gyms, they're usually playing some sort of hardcore or heavy metal or just some sort of hard rock. I think that there really does have to be some sort of connection with it between maybe just the community or the actual effect of the music on, what your capacity is.
Yeah. And in that study, they actually found, not to be all sciencey, but they found every time I got to the end of another paragraph, it was like, yes, it does have an effect. Yes, it does have an effect. Yes, it was positively, meaning impacting the lifter or the athlete.
Right.
Or they even did it based on different genders, how it impacts females versus males. And they kept reiterating that it was the content of the music that was really the main driver, that like what the person chose.
Right.
That when they would, I guess, fill out questionnaires and things like that, but whether it was cardiovascular, whether it was, weightlifting, whatever they were doing, they did find that they pushed a little further. They got out a couple more reps for sure. That is what they found. Yeah. And then they also found that recovery, having lower, calmer music upon recovery was actually helping the athletes recover better, bringing down the heart rate, all sorts of things. They were hooked up to monitors and things like that, and they were finding heart rate variability and things like that, and they were testing that when they were doing their set. And again, music dependent on what they chose, but 10 times out of 10, it was positively impacting what they were trying to achieve, which I thought was phenomenal. Yeah. I thought that was like an amazing thing to be able to test.
Right. So it's not just the image. It's not just the stereotype of like meathead gyms are going to be playing heavy metal because that's, these cavemen pick thing up and put thing down. There is some sort of connection there. Like I'm happy that it's see what we've found on the Scrap Metal podcast is that we can have whatever opinions we want, but it's really good when we have someone who knows what they're talking about backing us up. Like I feel now that what I should be doing is catering my playlist so that I have like Jesus piece during my set, and then during the rest periods just play like Enya. Or
I was gonna say Enya. I swear I was gonna say Enya.
Or like the pan flute music, like Straight Vibes. Those what was that compilation CD from the 90s? Like Immaculate Vibes.
Pure Moods.
Pure Moods. There you go. And Pure Moods. Oh boy. And this is why we're friends.
Yep.
And this is why we're friends.
Because I was going to say Enya, cool down to Enya, but I was going to say before too that, I don't know if they're going to play John Cicada at a, in a powerlifting gym.
I mean, that song might help me bench 600 pounds.
You know what? I take it back. John Cicada.
Oh man,
he slaps.
I love John Cicada.
John, if you're listening, we love you.
I would love to think that John Cicada listens to this podcast. John, if you're out there, we love you. Speaking of which, what song do you think would push you to bench 600 pounds?
Oh man, it's funny. Everything happened this morning. It's a very weird day.
Steph has never worked out before today. She just became a personal trainer this morning.
Today was day one.
It's a great day one. You were in a book in your first day.
Yeah. I did book a client on my interview at the gym I used to work at, though. That's when my boss was like, "You're hired."
There you go.
So I recently discovered Avatar out of Sweden.
Sure.
I know. You laugh, right? But it came, I don't even know, it must have come up on my Apple Music as a suggestion for me. And I guess they have a new song, like a 2024 song, I believe. It's called On the Other Side of Tonight. It came on this morning, and I happened to be doing a little bit of a treadmill because, I had 4 slices of pizza yesterday. And it was a part where it was
no cardio, huh?
I didn't say none. You got to do some, guys. But it was a part. I have a pre-programmed in my treadmill.
Right.
As a hike.
Right.
Uphill trudge. But at some point, the guy started jogging at a 15% incline, and I was like, oh. Okay, I guess we're jogging now. We're doing this now. And this song came on, and I was like, oh, let me think about this for a second. And it just did this amazing type of crescendo of drums. And I was like, yep, right uphill. I'm like, this is perfect to suggest for later, because I was like, I wanted to hop off and stop, drink, do my little, I'm going to take a rest, but I didn't. It pushed me up that hill because I'm not a runner, and I wanted to quit. I literally wanted to quit because it was hard. Right. And that's why most people quit exercising, because it's hard. Yeah. Nobody wants to get up and do it. But Avatar, they're quirky. There's some interesting sounds that they always, I've listened to a couple of their things before. If you haven't, they're out of Sweden, kind of really strange sounds that they're kind of throwing in there, like a whoop, like a Bigfoot whoop. Some knocking
on trees.
Knocking on the tree. So that I was like, yes, I could get down with this. I also recently discovered a female band called Conquer Divide.
Yeah.
That chick can scream.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I went through their whole album. I don't love every single song, but some of them are pretty legit.
Yeah.
They're good.
Yeah, we've talked about them before. They're really good.
Yeah. On the mornings that you don't, you need to start out, although the study did say you got to start out harder. That kind of in warm up gets people going, more so than starting lighter with the music. You want to start out a little bit more heavy, which I was surprised at. Not everybody works out at 5 a.m., but there's only so much that my ears can take at 5:15 in the morning. But I thought Conquer Divide, I thought they're pretty rad. But Avatar was this morning, and it helped me get up the hill. Some of their newer stuff was pretty good. It really interesting and eclectic.
Nice.
So I suggest checking them out.
Nice. Chris, what about you? If you were faced with having to get 3 white lights on your lift, what would push you there?
So my initial reaction was to talk about the band Kalma and their song The Black Waltz, because it's got some of the qualities that I've been thinking about. It's kind of got a more of a symphonic death metal feel, but this song has a very epic feel, a very powerful feel to start off. But I decided to take a different approach. I thought about this, like, you hear the stories of like this frail grandmother who suddenly has the power to lift a car off of her grandchildren because of the adrenaline coursing through her veins. And for me, I think a song that would elicit that reaction from me, like the promise of never having to hear Taylor Swift again, if I could lift 600 pounds, that would do it. So, like, if you had You Belong With Me playing and you were like, Chris, the only way to turn this song off is to lift 600 pounds, you bet your ass I'm lifting 600 pounds. So that's the song.
I love that.
That's the song that would drive me to be able to lift. is just
The hate.
the
The hate
adrenaline,
drives you.
yeah, of just the adrenaline of like, this is the only way I escape. Like, I will move fucking like the Indiana Jones boulder out of the way to escape the music of Taylor
Chris is
Swift.
like, I'm not dropping a fucking bar on myself to Taylor Swift. I'm fucking pushing. Chris is such a hater that he would lift 600 pounds clear over his head. I love it. I love it. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now I feel like I've got to come up with a really funny answer. God damn it. See, okay. No, for me, like my whole thing is when I'm lifting, I want something that's going to A, help me to keep pace, and B, just be something that's like really hard driving. Like Steph mentioned, if you're getting up really, really early to work out, or if you work out super late at night, like the last thing I want to do when I've just woken up is just have my headphones on and hear something really, really loud. But that's always the thing that just gets me going. Like I've absolutely worked out to like my goth playlist, and it's like, you know, Lips Like Sugar comes on. So I'm listening to Echo and the Bunnymen, and I'm like, yeah, no, this isn't hitting. Or I'll have like someone like Crypta come on, and you know, one of their songs, and that gets me really pumped. So it has to be something that's a little bit heavier. But I think like something that a band that embodies that real like brutality of like, yeah, I need to lift this. I'm going to lift this. I'm going to get this extra rep out, is Jesus Piece. And they have a song called Tunnel Vision, which is it's so fucking heavy, really, really cool bass tone, really like hard-hitting riff. I feel like that stuff is the kind of stuff where it's like it's really good for like paced reps as well, like reps to a tempo where you're like, all right, consciously trying to have a slower tempo as the weight's coming down, and like things like that I feel like help out, because it's like, okay, now I'm gonna hit my chest at the 4, and then at that 1 it's going back up, and I've got to get this weight up. And it's like that's what I love about the connection between music and lifting and just anything physical. Like I said, even if you're not somebody that works out, when you go to a concert, you're doing a workout. You're running around in the pit. Yeah. That's an exercise. Yeah. You're fucking pushing people around. You're crowd surfing, whatever. Just standing how long did we stand at the barrier at the Anthrax show? Oh yeah. That was a workout in and of itself, just standing for 6 hours.
And I mean, you know, we've talked about, I think this kind of combines two things we've talked about. I know in this study, Steph, you mentioned that rap music was brought up a lot. Anthrax's song Bring the Noise fucking gets me going every single time. When Chuck D came out on that stage, like I was unhinged, and I'm sitting there fucking headbanging and doing my best to rap along with Chuck D, and all of a sudden, like my hamstring cramped up, and I was standing there as like I don't know what was that, like 2 years ago? I was like a 34-year-old man. Like, this is how I die. This is, I mean, this is where I die.
The pit is going to overtake me.
I
am
am going to just collapse here. I'm going to tell John, just leave me. Go on without me. I'm going to die here on the Coney Island boardwalk. And yeah, that's it for me.
We're leaving, and I run back for Chris like I'm Forrest Gump looking for Bubba.
Yes, it was just like, it was just like that. But it's eventually I got better. But yeah, it's at a concert. I'll never forget the first time I saw Sum 41 at the Crazy Donkey. And I went nuts because they had, I don't know if they'd done it already. They probably already done it where they did like the Metallica Icons where they like played half of Master of Puppets. So at the live show, they played Master of Puppets. And I remember going nuts for that. And like, it was crazy. And I remember after the show, I was like drenched in sweat, and I was like wiping my face off with my Iron Maiden t-shirt. And like the two girls that I went with are like, you went fucking nuts, dude. And I'm like, yeah, like it's, I love Sum 41. So of course I went fucking nuts at the show. But it's being at a show like that, especially if you're going to be that active, like that is, like I said, I'm into fitness, this whole pizza in my mouth. Like that's the joke. Like that classic, that's me. Like you're talking about curls, I'm talking about curly fries, all right? Like that's That's me. So, like, 2 seconds in the pit.
But I like those too.
2 seconds in the pit, I'm gassed. 2 verses into Bring the Noise, I'm dead. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's important because one of the things they did mention was that if it's in your ear, individual listening to something, or whether it's on in the gym, elicits 2 very different responses. People were not as responsive to whatever bullshit the gym is playing. You know, obviously the odds of somebody being into that music and it's not loud enough, or it's too loud, or it's usually, you know, I'm like, yeah, there's house music, has its time and place, right? But like, that was something that, you know, it's way different than when you're at a show.
Yeah.
You know, the show is so loud you can't hear until the next day, maybe.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and volume
maybe
has to
my
play a
hearing
part
back.
in it. Yeah, right? Like volume, feeling, if you don't have headphones on, then it has to be loud enough for you to actually feel the pulse of the bass.
Right. It's like, right. And then the way I look at it is like the gym chooses the music. Back when I was in gyms, I don't go in gyms anymore.
Right.
But when the gym chooses the music, it's like, it made me think of like when you used to be younger and go to the roller skating rink and you have to like bring your own skates. I mean, everyone brings their own skates and you have to rent the shitty ones from the place. Right. And you're like, I guess I'll just deal with it. You know, these shit skates that the place is providing you.
Yeah.
And they suck, and everyone's got their shiny skates on.
Right.
So it's like when you're at a gym and you have to deal, you know, these days, everyone's got a headset on. Everyone's got rarely that you forget them. But if you do, your workout's going to suck.
Yeah, then you're going to be working out to You Belong With Me.
Yeah.
But you brought up a really good point too, though.
And weak.
You brought up a really good point about like house music. Like house music absolutely has a place in physical activity and you know, exercise.
Yeah.
And that's cardio. I feel like I can, if I have to do burpees, then I want some like music to be going on in the background. You know what I mean? Or like some old school, like real techno, like fucking Born Slippy. Like Born Slippy should be playing anytime I have to do some cardio. Because then it's the same thing as like, am I keeping tempo as I'm doing curls? Or like whatever to whatever riff I have going on, I'm gonna be keeping tempo, and like that's just the way that my brain works. Where I'm like, of course I'm lifting to the beat of this song, but if I have to do cardio and I'm like on a treadmill, or I have to do a really repetitive cardiovascular workout, I want something that's gonna keep me at that pace, and it's like that's perfect for it. It's perfect for it because it's just it's just hitting you in the head again and again and again, and you're keeping that exact pace.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the day, because you'll probably have these days where you're just, even in the car, right? Whether I'm working out or I'm in the car, where I'm like, nope. Like I'm skipping everything. Like nothing tastes good.
Yeah.
You know? And then I've spent my entire workout skipping songs and I didn't listen to anything.
Or gotten any workout done.
Which happens. I'm just standing there like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to have to be.
What muscle does this?
The damn thing. Now I'm like, I don't even. Now it's a squeeze. The new AirPods, it's like a double squeeze.
I don't like that.
They're literally pinching. Yeah, it's a pinch.
They're gonna give me carpal tunnel now.
I can't do it. Yeah, not these little hands.
Yeah,
not these tiny hands.
So like I mentioned before, a lot of times with the Scrap Metal Podcast, it's just us spewing our own opinions without a lot of backing. So I'm really glad that we were able to have Stephanie on with us today to give us a little bit of not just heavy metal street cred, but some actual scientific, weight training street cred. Yep. So Stephanie, thank you so much for taking part in this episode. It was great having you on. And as we do with every episode, let's get into some suggestions. Steph, why don't you suggest a song for our listeners to work out to?
As I said before, I had a good experience this morning with Avatar. If you're a big heavy lifter, you want something heavy and interesting that's going to give you kind of like a what was that in the background.
Right.
Not to pull your attention away, but to make you listen.
Right.
So definitely that. But also if I go completely on the other side, you will know them well. They pop into my playlist every now and then, and I never, ever skip Iron Tom. not heavy.
Yeah.
But let me give these guys some credit because Zach Irons, their guitarist, he also does vocals, was the original drummer from Chili Peppers. His dad.
Right.
Was the original drummer. And they're now on tour actually opening for Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
their little band, Iron Tom, is, you went to the show with me years ago, and I still follow them. Definitely completely different vibe, but they do have some songs that for cadence, if you don't want to, at 5 a.m., if that's when you work out, if you don't want to start with someone yelling in your ear, which is probably what you need. But sometimes if you need a cool down, they're great. Super funny, some of the songs, but you can do anything to their music.
Right.
So Iron Tom is the band. Check them out. They got a couple albums and some new stuff coming out now. So yeah, that's my suggestion. I went with a little heavy and a little lighter for you. You didn't just want to talk about Tool and AFI the whole time. So I restrained myself.
I thought for sure it was going to be AFI. Chris, is yours AFI?
Surprisingly, no. But a band that I have talked about before is the band Burning Witches. They're a all women like thrash metal, symphonic death metal kind of thing. And on their first album, Hexenhammer, they have a cover of Holy Diver. And so that's my suggestion this week is their cover of Holy Diver. It is really good. I don't know her name, but the lead singer has a great voice. She sounds great. She can do like high-pitched belts. She can do great growls. She can do great screams. And so she sounds great doing Holy Diver. I've brought them up before because they do a cover of Savage's Hall of the Mountain King. She sounds great on that. The band sounds great on that. So I was going backwards through their discography because I've only really listened to their newest album, The Dark Tower, and that album, what's it called? Like The Witch of the North, something like that. I don't fucking know. But I decided to go back and listen to all their albums.
Her brother was a witch, bro. Her sister was a witch.
I decided to go back. I was listening to their discography, and on their first album, they have a cover of Holy Diver. So my suggestion is everyone check out Burning Witches and their cover of the Dio classic Holy Diver.
That's awesome. I love these two suggestions so far. Absolutely not what I thought you guys were going to suggest. I thought you were both going to suggest AFI. So proving me wrong. Shows what I know.
I had to.
So for this episode, again, like I love working out to super, super heavy music. And I also love finding new music to listen to. So my friend Tiger suggested the band Sunburner and their song Requiem. Holy shit. When you're talking about like, okay, somebody screaming in your ear at 5 a.m., it's going to be this song. I absolutely love it. It's that ga 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 da ga 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 sort of like rhythm in the riff in the beginning and like just really, really gnarly vocals. I love stuff like that because it gets your blood flowing and like I don't want to have coffee right at 5 a.m. when I'm about to work out or 6 a.m. when I'm about to work out. I'd rather just listen to some heavy fucking music and let that propel my workout. So make sure
you're just raw dogging it through. With nothing.
No pre-workout anymore. No, none of it. I do my coffee afterward on the drive to work. And that's why my body never cools down.
Damn. Hot boy. He's a hot boy forever.
I just sweat from the head. It's disgusting. So check out the band Sunburner and their song Requiem. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Scrap Metal Podcast, and thanks, Stephanie, once again for joining us. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night, and go lift.